here at the Capitol? Have you read the report?
I haven't read that closely.
Well, let me tell you a few things that they say in there, and I want to ask you a few questions. He said there were 26 confidential human sources there at the Capitol that day. Does that surprise you?
No.
Doesn't surprise you. Okay. He said 17 of those 26 confidential human sources entered restricted space they weren't allowed to go into. Does that surprise you?
First, just want to begin with a news alert. Guess what? Joe Biden is not the president anymore. So maybe we can move on. Maybe we can move into the present, because it seems like we are living in the past. And listen.
And then so-called rad-trad or radical traditionalist Catholics are those who only go to Catholic Mass, who some of them believe that the regular English Mass is invalid or reject Vatican II or what have you, but not a single one of them I know even own guns, much less are they radicals or whatever. And then when I look at this memorandum, I see they're quoting the Southern Poverty Law Center, a viciously political defamatory group. I've worked a lot on immigration issues. I think Southern Poverty Law Center has declared every immigration reform group to be a racist or white supremacist group. They're just a walking defamation factory. Have you seen the Southern Poverty Law Center quoted in other FBI memos over the years?
I have not.
Okay.
I have not. But again, that was entirely inappropriate and never should have happened. And the FBI had to walk that back. But again, that is an example of weaponization. That is social weaponization at the FBI. It's entirely inappropriate. And it never should have happened.
The FBI not going after bad guys, but going after enemies of the political regime. Third world stuff. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. And by the way, the director of the FBI had to apologize for that. It's not a debunked theory. With that being said, I will recognize the ranking member of the full committee.
Mr. Whitson, before you got what Mr. Johnson described as high-paying job as Senior Director of Federal Affairs Foundation for Government Accountability, you worked in the FBI, is that right?
Yes.
10 years in the FBI?
Yes.
And prior to that, you were in the United States Army?
Yes, sir.
300 combat missions in Iraq, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And your time at the FBI, you were special agent in the directorate, supervisory special agent in the Directorate of Intelligence. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
In your testimony, and I just want to get you familiar with this subject matter, in your testimony you said one of the ways we can eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse is including the overspending on confidential human sources. You said that in your testimony, right?
Yes, Chairman.
Are you familiar with the Inspector General's report about the confidential human sources who were there on January 6, 2021 here at the Capitol? Have you read the report?
I haven't read that closely.
Well, let me tell you a few things that they say in there, and I want to ask you a few questions. He said there were 26 confidential human sources there at the Capitol that day. Does that surprise you?
No.
Doesn't surprise you. Okay. He said 17 of those 26 confidential human sources entered restricted space they weren't allowed to go into. Does that surprise you?
No.
Doesn't surprise you. They did things they weren't allowed to do.
Well, I need more details about, so were they doing it on their own? Were they told to do it? Were they, that kind of thing?
We want to know the answers to those questions too.
Yes, sir.
4 of them went inside the Capitol, and 2 of the 4 who went inside the Capitol were specifically asked by the FBI to be there that day for this. Does that surprise you?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
But I need to know more facts.
And does it surprise you that any of them, none of these individuals, to our knowledge, were charged with anything?
No, I mean, if they were tasked to be there.
Okay.
I would need more information.
Okay, well, in your testimony, you talked about overspending on confidential human sources. Do you believe, is it likely these 26 were being paid by the FBI at the time they were doing this?
I think that's, if they are a confidential human source that's actually on the books, then it's highly likely that they were paid.
Highly likely they're being paid.
If they were tasked to do that.
Even if they weren't specifically asked to be there that day? You think there's likely they were paid?
So if they weren't asked to be there, I think usually they're giving us like a lump payment periodically, so it wouldn't be for a specific tasking necessarily. It'd be hard to answer that.
Are you familiar with what was released here earlier this week, the text communications between FBI agents regarding October 14th, 2020 New York Post story on the Hunter Biden laptop? Have you had a chance to review those?
I haven't seen those text messages.
Well, let me just read a couple to you here. It says, nobody on the call is authorized to comment on the New York Post story. Twitter is treating this as disinformation. I just want to read something that took place earlier that day. The way this day worked is the story came out. That day, Elvis Chan, a guy with the FBI, is meeting with the tech company, something he did on a regular basis in the run-up to the 2020 presidential election. At that meeting, someone asked, hey, there's this New York Post story, is the laptop real? And we know this took place because we deposed Mr. Brady Olson, and he gave us this information. And he said when that question was asked, the response was, yes, the laptop is real. Then we get these text messages, which we didn't have before, we just got them this week, these text messages which relate what happens after that. So the FBI has confirmed to Twitter at a FITF meeting on October 14th that the laptop is real. And then we have these text messages back and forth where they says no one is authorized to comment further. Twitter is treating this as disinformation. You find that troubling that the FBI knew something was real, confirmed it at a meeting, then changed their story and went to no comment, no further comment, and allowed the tech companies to run with the idea that this story was disinformation?
Yeah, I do think that's problematic, and I do think the relationships that they tried to build with members of the FBI with these other organizations were problematic.
Yeah, and the ranking member said, oh, the Republicans want to say the FBI was political, and what really wasn't the case. If this is not political, I do not know what is, because this was the whole basis for the 51 former intel officials doing their letter. And the FBI knew. Now we have written evidence they knew, coupled with the deposition we took before where they admitted this. And then later in the day when they're meeting with other tech companies, they go with no comment. And they even admit here Twitter is running with the disinformation story. Even before the 51 intel officials come out with their letter, which is baloney, they're running with that. And the FBI was part of fostering and promoting that story.
It's unacceptable.
Totally unacceptable.
And it shows how one bad apple, and there were probably others, but you can see how much of a problem that is. And that one bad apple behaves that way, the entire Bureau's reputation is impacted. Yeah. Trust is lost across the country. And so that's why it's so important to find folks like that, going back to the entrenched bureaucrats. You have to find them and remove them because that's all it takes is one bad apple.
I think that was point one in your testimony, which is exactly what Ms. Bondi and Mr. Patel are doing, is getting rid of those individuals who foster this kind of political environment where you're going after your political foes, where you're telling things, saying things, allowing things to be believed that aren't accurate when you knew the truth all along.
That's right. True.
I yield back.
Thank the chairman. I now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, Jasmine Crockett.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And I first just want to begin with a news alert. Guess what? Joe Biden is not the president anymore. So maybe we can move on. Maybe we can move into the present, because it seems like we are living in the past. And listen, these are not the good old days, you know, like you used to sit around and your grandparents would talk to you about what used to happen. What we need to be talking about is how we are going to legislate, because I think that some of my colleagues have confused what our jobs are. And I get that we're sitting in judiciary. And so it may seem as if we are here to be litigators, but we are here to be legislators, which means that we are supposed to be writing laws, not trying to have our own trials and determine whether or not something is true or not, or whatever the case is, or who should be sued, who shouldn't be sued. All I know is that a great American hero, a good senator out of New Jersey, said something to the effect yesterday as he was shattering the record for holding the floor, a record that had been held by another racist in this country. As he shattered that, he said something about the fact that this should not be about left versus right. It should be about right versus wrong. And I am going to tell you that I want us to focus on right versus wrong. The reason that we are struggling right now in this country as it relates to people not trusting agencies, honestly, a lot of it is because of elected leaders. Let me tell you, one of the things that the chairman and I actually agree upon, we don't agree on a lot, is that we both know that there has been a sharp incline as it relates to threats upon our lives. Regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on, we both know and agree that as sitting members of Congress, we both are enduring more death threats than anybody should in this country. And I believe that it is because of the divisive rhetoric, and it is because of the selective enforcement of things. And so when we have, and I'm gonna be clear, because I had remarks and I'm going a whole other way. To have the sitting attorney general go on, and I'm gonna call it faux news. I know some of y'all love it, but it's fake to me. to have her go on Fox News and to then decide that she wanted to send a threat to me, it was wrong. Because here it is, she is the highest law enforcement agent in this country, and people are watching and they are consuming this information and they are believing that simply because I decided that I wanted to exercise my right to free speech, which I am not abridged from doing, that she then wanted to then politicize something that should not be politicized. I don't like Elon Musk. I'm gonna say it 50,000 times. I don't like him. I don't like that he going out there and he firing people. I think that he's a crook because somehow the rest of us can't sit around and get whatever federal contracts we want. The rest of us can't sit around and get law enforcement and get them somehow ordained as federal law enforcement to protect him. The rest of us can't get our dealerships protected by the federal government. That is somebody that is operating above the law. For whatever reason, just because he has a lot of money, more money than everybody else. And yes, I am happy to see that on my birthday, which is what I said, there were peaceful protests around this world against him because he is a problem. And so you never should have somebody that is sitting that high and is going to sit up here and threaten a sitting member of Congress when she knew good and well, if she watched the entire thing, that I specifically told protesters to make sure you consult with lawyers, just like I've told protesters over and over and over in the history of me advising people to go out and exercise their constitutional right. The fact that there are other sitting members that have received letters of threat from this new DOJ tells me that they are about retribution and they are not about following the law. The reason that our party, or I won't even say our party, our country is torn apart is because we can't even agree on right versus wrong. This should not be left versus right. The only thing that we're asking is that we have law enforcement that will show up when there is an actual crime. If somebody calls and says, hey, I need you to investigate this cyber crime, or I need you to investigate this child pornography, or I need you to investigate this robbery, then we want somebody to show up, and we don't want them to look at us and act as if just because I'm black or because I'm woman, that I am not worthy of having that case investigated, because we have an administration that is continuously railing against diversity, equity, and inclusion, or we don't need people that show up that feel like diversity should not be valued. That is why we should have somebody that may show up and looks like me. The final thing that I'll say, because you've been gracious, is this. When I first became a public defender, I had no criminal defense experience. And I walked in and I told my boss, Charlie, I said, listen, you should hire me. He said, why? I said, because I'm black. Charlie looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, let me tell you something. When I walk in, I'm going to walk in with a level of rapport and understanding that maybe some of my other colleagues will not. Charlie offered me my job, and I worked my butt off, and I worked really, really hard for all of my clients, not just those that look like me, and that is what it looks like to serve. Thank you.
Ms. Parker.
Thank you. First of all, just real quick, I wanted to speak to Ranking Member Crockett. I have an appreciation for what you're saying between right and wrong. I myself received a message on X this morning wishing that I was inside of a Tesla that would explode, and so I understand what it feels like to receive a threat. It's entirely inappropriate and unacceptable, and I should not be the target of violence, and so I just wanted to tell you that is wrong, and that should be, someone needs to be held accountable for that.
I will say likewise.
Thank you.
That is wrong.
That is wrong.
And, you know, just to chime in for a second, more in general, Department of Justice attorney, should there be enhanced penalties or penalties?
Absolutely. If you're abusing your law enforcement power to push your political and social agendas and doing the wrong thing for the wrong reasons, you must be held accountable.
Thank
and
you.
again, I agree with Whitson. In the private sector, I came from a hedge fund and worked on Wall Street before this. That would not be tolerated. If you're not doing your job and you're not contributing to the mission, it is not okay to be a federal employee and just come and collect a paycheck when you're actually not contributing to the mission. And unfortunately, I saw that quite frequently at the FBI. I would say a small percentage of the agents are doing a lot of the work.
Thank you. Dr. Hunt. It concludes today's hearing. Without objection, all members will have...
Oh, sorry. I have a UC.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I'd like unanimous consent to enter into the record an article titled "No Bias Found in FBI
without
Report
objection.
on Catholic Extremists." Thank you.
All members will have 5 legislative days